Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Grid Dynamics webinar today. We're going to be talking about generative AI, and my name is June Bauer. I am so happy you were able to join us today to listen to what I think will be a very interesting discussion. So to start, I'd like to review our agenda for today. We're going to do our introductions in just a minute. Of our panelists. Then we're going to have a wonderful presentation by Rowan Curran, who is joining us from Forrester. And Rowan, we're so happy to have you here today to join us and share with us your perspective on the state of the generative AI market. Then we're going to open this up to a panel discussion. And that panel includes you, our audience. So we really welcome you being a part of this. And we would love it if you could also join with us in either the Q&A or the chat. Let us know if you have some questions on your mind as we're going through the material, because we'd love to be able to answer those as well. And we may answer them during the course of the dialogue, but we will definitely have some Q&A at the end as well. So that's our plan for today. Let's go to the next slide and introduce our panelists. So I'd like to, Rowan, turn it over to you first and let you introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you so much, June. It's so great to be here with you all. My name is Rowan Curran. I am a senior analyst at Forrester Research. I cover a variety of topics within the AI machine learning space, including AI machine learning applications, as well as generative AI and search.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Eugene Steinberg. I'm founding engineer and technical fellow at Grid Dynamics. I'm covering in our city office a number of technology practices, including AI and generative AI. Happy to be here and talk about this exciting topic with you.
Thank you both for introducing yourselves. I wanted to introduce myself as well. My name is June Bauer, and I am so delighted to be here with Eugene and Rowan, because they are super duper technologists who bring a really exciting outlook on AI. And I'm all about technology. I started my career working with Doug Engelbart. I know it's kind of a famous name with programmers, but he's the one who invented the mouse. Many years ago, he also invented really the way the modern internet works. Such a creative and amazing person. And went from there right across the street to work with Steve Jobs. And I also had the opportunity to work with Steve Wozniak. So again, some amazing technologists where I learned a lot. And from there, I went to work with Bob Metcalfe, who I think you probably know invented Ethernet. He was my boss at 3Com. And from there, I went and worked with two amazing people who really were equally responsible for the early success of the Macintosh. And that would be John Warnock and Chuck Geschke, who, if you don't know who they are, go Google them, but they invented PostScript, which is a way to get what you see on your computer screen to look like that when you print. So amazing. And the last person I want to call out that I had the opportunity to work with was Alain Rossmann. And if you don't know him, Google him too. But he started a company called Unwired Planet. And what they did is they figured out how to put how to put digital information on analog lines. What does that mean? It meant putting data on telephone lines. They were the ones that enabled companies to put email and everything else we see today on the modern phone on phones, which was an amazing invention. And for that, he took the company public and is a billionaire now. So pretty crazy. I love technology. It's what gets me excited every day. And I'm so honored to be here with two amazing technologists again and to learn from them. So you guys, without further ado, I want to turn it over to Rowan. And Rowan has a great presentation for you to kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. Go ahead, Rowan.
Great. Thank you so much, June. I'm so excited to be here with you all today. And, generative AI is a very exciting topic. I'm sure you've all heard quite a bit about it over the past 9 months. But today I want to kind of take us through what the current market state is and what some of the practicalities are around what applications enterprises are building, as well as some of the techniques that they're using to do it. So to start us off here, we've really seen generative AI just sweep across the enterprise over the past 9 months. So this is a poll, or this is data from a poll that we ran earlier this year. And as you can see, just 2 months ago, rather, you can see that the majority of folks are already experimenting and expanding upon their generative AI projects. And we have a much smaller number of folks that are still just educating and exploring the space overall. So this is not just, a wave of excitement that isn't translating into actual practical on-the-ground outcomes and applications. This is a real thing that is very much working into the business world in a real way. And an important aspect of this impact is not advancing the slides right now. I'm not sure why. Great. Important impact of this is the top-down and bottom-up complementary pressures that we're seeing from generative AI. And this is coming from the fact that we have CEOs, CIOs, CTOs who have played with something like ChatGPT themselves and are starting to see, oh, maybe this can have an impact on my enterprise. And it's simultaneously driven by all of the individual line personnel who are saying, wow, I really want to use this in my work and I'm going to go out and use it today. And this is really driving a nice complementary cycle of innovation and excitement around generative AI. Now, it's important to also recognize that AI itself is not going to take its job from you. There's a lot of discussion around job loss and replacement of humans with machines in business overall. But in the short term and the medium term, and especially as we are skilling up on these things, it's important to recognize that it's not just going to be a replacement story. This is really a story of how we are using new tools to do our jobs better and to, yes, change our jobs, but not to necessarily replace ourselves whole cloth. Now, when we're kind of looking at how that we came here, it's important to just very quickly say that it wasn't the models that got us to this place of excitement and building of real applications. It was the models, or sorry, it was the applications. It was the experiences built around the models that really made for this very compelling web application that we all know as ChatGPT. And so as we're thinking about applications for our own internal folks or facing our customers, it's important to still keep that core focus that we should have had for years around the customer and the actual experience of the application. Now, when we're looking at the enterprise aspect of this and putting generative AI to work in the enterprise, it's important to also remember that, well, as I was saying before, it doesn't automate things completely today. It helps make a lot of things easier. But along with making a lot of things easier, it can make doing bad things easier as well. So when we're thinking about generative AI in an enterprise context, there's some things that we need to keep in mind. But before we get to those risk reduction measures and managing some of the approaches, let's talk about what people are actually doing with generative AI in the enterprise today. So currently, we're seeing kind of 4 core use cases around genAI. The first case is around writing and communication support. So these are tools that allow you to generate text, maybe help you write a blog or a LinkedIn post, or even a white paper or an RFI or a response to a regulatory request or something like that. We're seeing this adopted at a very organic level at the team level, as well as also at the departmental and broader enterprise level, with folks doing things like getting enterprise versions of ChatGPT for all of their employees. And then we're also seeing tons of use cases around content summarization and transformation. A lot of these are in the contact center, where there are transcripts that are being created through speech-to-text analysis of calls already, and large language models are used to summarize them and also to generate additional metadata from that content to drive further downstream analytics. And we're seeing this done at scale today, particularly in a couple large telecoms. Now, this third use case is really where we're seeing kind of the most broad adoption in different types of applications today. This is in knowledge retrieval and search type of use cases. And we'll talk a bit more about how some of that might work in the coming slides, but this is really where a lot of the applications are focused today, using a large language model in combination with either a lexical search or a vector search on the back end to find the right documents and then deliver them to you in a more consumable way. And the fourth item here is around Turing bots, as we call them, for coding and testing. So Turing bots are how we at Forrester refer to the broad space of the increasing automation and augmentation of software development processes with various AI tools. And we're talking about this in the context of generative AI. We generally mean code assistant tools like Codex, GitHub Copilot, Cody, and things of that nature. And so we're seeing a lot of adoption of this, of these 4 use cases overall. Now, when it comes to how we're actually using these use cases in the enterprise, we need to think about the actual management of how we're dealing with the models. And there's two main pieces to think about here at a high level. We need to think about how we're shaping the inputs, what is going into the model with the query, and then how we're shaping the outputs. Because we're not just going to take the generated text from a large language model and go and use it in some enterprise context without some verification. So on the user side, we need to do things like model grounding, this practice of prompt engineering that you may have heard a bit about, giving the model some data to work with through single and few-shot learning, and also imparting business rules and SME knowledge. And then on the output side, we have a lot of emerging techniques. You have simple, straightforward things like having a human review the content, checking it for factual content with another language model, using another language model to see whether it has the correct brand voice or whether it's using inclusive language or more nuanced aspects of understanding the output. So when we're looking at how to use a large language model in the enterprise, we really need to think about these two sides of the data going into and coming out of the model in order to reduce our risk and shape the behavior of the model in the direction that we want it. Now, having said that, it's not just generative AI that we need to be thinking about in this context. We're not just talking about large language models. We're not even just talking about diffusion models or GANs. We're talking about also including things like propensity modeling, intent modeling, using forecasting and other machine learning models in combination with large language models in order to produce the most valuable and interesting and robust enterprise applications. Now, I'll give you an example of how an enterprise application might look via a public-facing consumer application. And so on this next slide here, I'm going to basically take you through, so in this next slide here, I'm going to, sorry, I thought that we had, sorry, this slide here. Yes, this is the slide I was looking for. Sorry. So when we're in the enterprise and we're trying to shape the inputs and the outputs of the model to get the best outcome, retrieval augmented generation is one of the main techniques that we're seeing used today. And the way that it does this is it allows you to actually reduce hallucinations, or as we refer to them, coherent nonsense, the very authoritative assertions of these models that are actually incorrect. It allows you to reduce that by folding in additional technology. So with this approach, the first query submitted up here at the top, how do I treat a deep cut? It's not actually asking the language model, to produce an answer from within itself. What it's doing is it's taking that query, breaking it up into some standard search queries, as you can see here on the left, pulling back those results, and then generating an answer for you from those results. And what that allows you to do is focus the outcome and focus the generated content on a specific data set and on a specific piece of knowledge, not only so that it doesn't, just try and generate some random Shakespeare sonnet or something of that nature, but also so that you can then verify and point to the data source that was producing the information that you wanted to deliver overall. Now, when this comes to kind of the broader enterprise context, it's going to be connecting a lot of different systems, not just the core search and the core search and language generation overall. And when you're looking at how you're actually going to acquire this stuff, there's a couple different approaches that we're seeing customers take today. And each of these offers a different degree of guardrails provided as part of the approach itself. So at kind of the most extreme end, the most kind of Wild Westy space, we have folks that are building off of open source models within their own environment. Now, this takes a lot of technical expertise. You have to do a lot to actually deploy the model within your own space to make sure it's inferencing correctly and scaling correctly, but it does give you more control over the training, refinement, and fine-tuning of that model if you want to go that route. Now, where we're seeing most folks go when they're building with generative AI, as opposed to just buying a capability, we're seeing them take the center route, the API SaaS service route. So there's a whole plethora of providers that can give you a large language model via an API service. There's even specialized ones that will have an API service for doing embeddings or doing a Q&A or something like that. So it basically gives you a bit more guardrails. And also these vendors provide you toxicity analysis, bias identification, and other tools to help you reduce your risk. But the vast majority, or not the vast majority, the significant majority of folks today we're seeing go this application route and get embedded generative AI capabilities from their existing application providers. And this is what is allowing so many folks to leverage it out today. So that was quite a whirlwind fast tour of, what exactly is going on in the generative AI market today and how folks are starting to acquire it. I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the details as we go on, but thank you so much for your attention on this. And yeah, looking forward to getting into the Q&A.
Wow, Rowan, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for taking us through that overview. And personally, I feel like I have a much better sense of what's going on in the industry and what's happening around us. So I think that's a great place to launch off on some questions. And I know I have some questions, and I think our audience members may have some questions too. If you're in the audience listening, number one, thank you so much for joining us today. And number two, we really encourage you to give us your feedback and share with us any questions you have. You may have had questions about Rowan's presentation. Put those in the Q&A, put them in the chat. And if you have questions going along, just flip them in, and we would be happy to address those as we go along. All right, guys. Well, let's get into this, because I think there's a lot of things that I know I'm curious about. And I'm going to start and ask a question that I think is something I'd love to hear from both of you on. And that is that when it comes to what's real and what isn't with generative AI, what are the kind of myths and misunderstandings that are most common? Because right now you look out there and everybody's saying all sorts of things. And I think one of them, Rowan, that you addressed was this idea that it's going to take our jobs. And I loved that. But give me your thoughts. And Eugene, maybe we can have you kick it off, since you haven't spoken yet. So go ahead.
Yes, since I was silent all this time. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's actually a great question, and the very topic of our webinar is basically not only to talk about the greatness and awesomeness of generative AI, but also touch a little bit about the pitfalls and smokes and mirrors which are currently surrounding us. We are in the center of a very big hype, technological hype, which is normal because we're actually witnessing the birth of the very transformative technology. At the same time, people start to think that we came up, like as a civilization, we came up not with a generative AI, but we came up with a general AI. And I literally kind of getting calls from various customers and investors and people in the industry with very strange requests, like, for example, how can I develop a business strategy with the usage of a large language model? And can I kind of power my kind of balance sheet into the model and get the sound business strategy out of it? Like, what should I do? And of course, the answer to that is that, yeah, we definitely will get a business strategy, and it will look sound. And sounds well, but in reality, it will be just something which the model is trying to look to make plausible, not to be plausible. So this is one of the very prevailing myths, that you can delegate the decision making to the large language models, and that you can delegate and expect a true intelligence from the system which was trained to lie extremely convincingly, right? Nobody trained large language models to speak truth. No, everybody trained them to basically predict what you want to hear next. And this is a very strong myth which is still prevalent. Second myth which I want to touch on is that the model is constantly trained. So many people believe that when we are communicating with the large language model, it hears them and tries to adjust and tries to kind of really understand what we want. And it's not only in the circles of users of large language models, but also in the circles of developers, because sometimes we expect that if they provide a lot of knowledge to the context of the large language models, the model somehow will learn from it, right? It's a myth, right? The model has a limited memory, and when this memory will be exhausted, like for contextual memory, it will forget everything about you and start with whatever knowledge was embedded into it during training process. So those are probably two myths which are very common in the generative AI world. And maybe Rowan, you can also kind of add some of the myths that you see in your practice.
Yeah, so I think those are two of the most important ones. And I before I get into mine, I just want to re-emphasize on your second point here that, I think so many of us had in mind sort of what ChatGPT was doing as a public, free web-based platform in terms of how it was handling data versus how data is being handled when we're talking about a business and especially an enterprise context. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because that seems to be one of the most persistent misunderstandings in this space overall. But I wanted to touch on two myself. So, the first one is it builds off of, your first point here that, it's kind of easy to just like put data into this and understand your business strategy or whatever else it is. But on top of that, a lot of folks have this idea that you can kind of give any type of data to a large language model and get some kind of good interpretation of it. And that is just simply not the case today. So large language models are very good at dealing with unstructured textual data of various kinds, but they are very not adapted to structured data, to mathematics and calculation, unless they've been specifically trained in that direction very particularly. So what we're seeing overall is that, folks are just like, okay, well, I could just, throw all of my business plans into it and it'll somehow pull out, what my ideal, next steps or product launches should be next quarter. And in reality, these systems are still, interconnected to enterprise systems that require touching different data sources. And a lot of this infrastructure that we, still spend a lot of time building, it's just that we now have much greater capability to derive insights and to have more useful information content created from that underlying data layer. Now, to kind of build off of that, one of the other big kind of misconceptions in the generative AI space is that it's very easy to just launch a generative AI application in production and just go, and you're off to the races. What we've seen largely is that it's very easy to get started in generative AI. It's very easy to create a prototype. It's very easy to connect a large language model to, a PDF or even a small subset of PDFs and say, oh, we have this great knowledge retrieval application. It takes a lot more work when you're actually thinking at building a enterprise level application that has to connect to multiple data sources, has to pull back information and sort through that information and give you the most relevant content to then generate, say, an answer from. If you are in an enterprise, you're not just looking at 4 or 5 documents. You might be working on a new project plan and you might need to look at, a database that has 4,000 or 5,000 documents in it and actually find the right relevant information in that and then generate the answer from that produced set of results. So in the enterprise context with generative AI, on the builder side, there's still a lot of these interconnected pieces that we need to think about when we're talking about enterprise applications. And to that end, I think that's why we've tended to see a lot of folks become much more interested in getting either embedded generative AI capabilities from an application provider or in sourcing some type of generative AI functionality or application from a third-party provider and partner that will work with them to help build that application so they don't have to do all of that work themselves.
Okay, that was spectacular. I love it. I love what you're saying, and it really helps me get a better sense, especially when we think about the enterprise, what it means to the enterprise in terms of generative AI. Let me follow that on with a question that I think, Rowan, you touched on it in your presentation, and Eugene, I'd like to hear from you on this now, which is, what are the most practical applications of generative AI? And I should say in the context of the enterprise, because Eugene, you work with so many companies and you get to see what's happening in the enterprise, what the demands are, and you also get to bring great ideas to them as well. And I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, there are, of course, the interest to general GenAI solutions is unprecedented. Like, everybody wants to hear about that, everybody wants to talk about that. But what really people are doing? Like, what are the actual practical use cases which we see, at least like from our company, implementing with our customers? So first, as Rowan said, like, one of the most attainable use case is, of course, revolutionization, like the whole revolution which is coming to access to the knowledge. And we have numerous customers who are integrating the large language models in their systems, which previously were occupied by enterprise search, right? Nobody wants anymore to sift through the links which are coming from the search engine. Everybody wants to receive a closed answers, but also the answers which are grounded in truth. This is very important aspect. We have a customer at financial sector like wealth management company, where the financial advisors, for example, are talking about the different questions in financial analytics or policies of the company, or getting access to the content of the last meeting with their customers. Like this is the situation when you cannot provide a false answer. It's better to say I don't know than to give some answer on which somebody will act incorrectly. And preventing hallucinations and guardrailing against these issues is the major concern there. So this is like one of the class like of how to access to the knowledge, but not only knowledge, but also enterprise data, like how to really talk to your data, how to substitute all the endless dashboards, which nobody remembers how to configure or select, with a simple question like, okay, how many customers we onboarded in Milwaukee, like in the last quarter, or what was the revenue from associated with this particular salesperson, or many different types of the questions which you can ask to the general kind of pool of your data. So this is very practical, and this is happening right now. If we forget for a second about the conversational AI aspect of a large language model, they are also extremely useful in the aspects of harmonization of the data. Basically, right now we have a power to really mine and dig into the wealth of enterprise data, which was hidden in the pile of unstructured text, conversations, reports, anything which was sitting in our data lake, absolutely unused, and we didn't know what to do with it. Now we can use large language models to mine this data, to extract available pieces of structured information from unstructured data and put it to use. Put it to use in our databases, put it to use in our machine learning models, which are predictive models and rigorously trained to predict things, like not just to convincingly like talk about them, and many other things. If we forget for a moment about large language model, there is also a big revolution in image generation, right? And in general, multimodality. Like the biggest trend which we believe is coming right now is convergence of all the foundational models together. Like we are seeing that right now. Like we have a situation when text models get integrated with image models and audio models and 3D models. And this gives the foundational models the deep awareness about the world just beyond the language. Language becomes the center of it, but on the periphery we have all other modalities: images, videos, audio, songs, 3D models, even sensor data. So that gives tremendous power. And we see a lot of customers are already using these multimodal models to, for example, perform automated attribution and extraction of the data from the image catalogs. Or especially marketplaces. We have a customer who is a marketplace, right? Like a huge marketplace, millions of products. And those products are attributed by sellers, and they don't care much about the quality. Like we're just trying to put everything there, which gives them the hope to sell. So this customer is using the large language models to clean up those titles and descriptions from spam, and enrich them from the real information from the product image. And this allows this customer to make a very high quality catalog, which we couldn't even dream of like 6 months ago. We talked with them 6 months ago, and or like 9 months ago, and they were planning all kinds of complex data science projects to basically do this, something which currently can be done relatively easily, not still kind of trivial, but relatively easy with foundational large language models. So those are kind of spectrum of solutions which we see right now in practice.
Yeah, that was great, Eugene. I love it, and it's makes it real for us to hear about those applications, but it also gives us a sense of what's realistic. I know. Yes,
one
please.
more thing which I wanted to add, just forgot to add about that. Of course, a huge revolution comes in the way how we develop software, right? Especially when how do we modernize the software, the legacy software. So like one of our customers, like they have a mainframe system with the language, I think it's called RPGI. It was probably developed long ago. Everybody who was developing the system in the retirement right now. And one of the real opportunities to leverage large language models to understand this obscure language because it knows it, reverse engineer it, and then convert it to something which people can understand, like Java, Python, something like that. And we are leveraging that with a lot of success to speed up this kind of legacy modernization project. So it's great.
Yeah, that is fantastic, and that is very interesting. And I appreciate your perspective, especially when you have the opportunity to work across so many companies and also so many technologies and such interesting development teams. So I want to turn to something that now is maybe a little intimidating for some people. And Rowan, I'm going to ask you this question, but from your perspective, what are the main limitations to large language models? What are the things that companies and our audience today should be thinking about and considering as they are doing their AI projects?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think, as I said before, people are very kind of magically minded about what the capabilities of large language models are. So when we're thinking about them today, it's important to recognize that these models are very powerful, but that power needs to be harnessed and directed in specific ways in order to actually get a good enterprise outcome. And so when we're thinking about how to use large language models, one of the core things that I say to folks is, don't think about this as a way to generate knowledge or as a way to create knowledge. This is a way to transform content. This is a way to transform and synthesize and deliver information in a different way. If you are thinking about building an application that will ask a large language model for that information, that is probably not the right direction to go. However, there is an exception to that, where if you are taking the route of fine-tuning a model with a question and answer set, you can direct the behavior of the core model to answer more accurately for specific topics by taking that approach. But still, there is variability in the responses. And so what that means is, and so kind of going back to the non-deterministic nature, is that you need to put a lot of controls around how you are giving data to the model and how you're getting data out of the model in order to have a robust enterprise system. And additionally, you need to think about how you're actually going to audit and log the information within that application itself. Because these models are non-deterministic, you can't just give it the same input twice and expect the same output. So what we're seeing is folks are basically creating, the old snapshot log tactic, where basically you just capture everything that happened in the application process in order to be able to verify that down the road. Now, the other big thing that folks look at doing with large language models is immediately building some kind of customer-facing application, usually some kind of customer-facing chatbot application. They say, I want ChatGPT for my enterprise, but facing the customer. That introduces a lot of risk because these models are non-deterministic and because shaping the behavior takes a good amount of work. Now, you can build a model that uses build a chatbot that uses large language models that is facing your customers, but that requires a lot of guardrails and nuance and is probably going to involve additional answer technologies beyond just the large language model itself. Now, I actually want to kind of spin this last piece on its head to not talk about what the limitations are, but to kind of push people towards some of the use cases that I think we're not thinking about quite as much. And that's going to harken back to the second use case that I was talking about around the summarization and transformation of content. So a lot of folks are really just saying, okay, we can use this for chatbots, we can use this to retrieve search information. But one of the best uses that we're seeing of this stuff right now is to basically use it as a data enrichment tool. So basically looking at, say, the call center transcripts and creating the summary, but not just creating the summary, but creating the list of topics from that call, a list of keywords, various things that you would want to use to then create features that would drive downstream text analytics on that data that would then help you improve your operations and hopefully your overall call center experience for both the employees and the customers. So there's a lot of focus on these kind of like end user facing use cases, but there's also a lot of process oriented use cases that I think are important to look at as well. But again, with those, it's important to focus on just transforming content and interacting with it or allowing you to interact with it in a different way.
I have to say that was really thought-provoking. I was sitting there thinking about it so hard and thinking about why is it we're all being driven to these chat type applications. And I have to say that part of it is it's financially obvious, right? That you're going to quote unquote save money and have a better experience by doing it. But I think your point is so good that there is high risk in doing that. And it may be worth taking a second look at in processes where you're going to get value, because that application you talked about, for me, when I think about it, is, whoa, if you could get that information and build a better experience, build a better product, that's going to win every time over improvements in customer service, right? To me, that's the big winner financially. Just our minds don't necessarily go there. So I think your message, Rowan, about think twice about customer facing to start, and there's plenty of other applications that can be extremely valuable in the enterprise. I love that.
Well, if I could just add on to that really quickly. So the example that I was just talking about, I think that's also a good way to look at how you can have an initial use case that then can feed into subsequent use cases down the road. So a lot of the folks who are doing the summarization analysis of the call center transcripts are focusing on like the call center operations and customer service experience as the primary use case. That they are creating that metadata and that content for the further downstream analytics, but that's not necessarily the big focus of their initial use case. But their initial use case is then setting the stage and creating the foundation of data for whatever subsequent use cases they're going to apply this to.
Yeah, which is a great point. So yeah, we don't have to swallow the elephant to start our meal. I mean, we can start small and we can learn from that, and we can gain experience and gain foundations and then build from there. And that could be potentially a way to think about building your prowess in AI and building an AI practice that really makes a difference to your company. So Eugene, I want to turn to you now and ask you of kind of feet on the street, rubber meets the road question, which is, what apps or aspirations of generative AI are most challenging to implement? And I say most challenging to implement because I know you've seen your fair share, but maybe you can also touch on, similar to what Rowan said, where might we want to start? Where would you recommend starting? What's going to be a way to implement and get a first success?
Well, again, as I already said, the most challenging parts of implementing genAI in principle is when genAI is engaged into the decision making. We also a fair share of very cool demos where the generative AI kind of seems to be able to reason and plan and even like make a complicated plans and execute on those plans. However, those demos are pretty heavily cherry-picked. So it's pretty easy to get into the situation of the confusion. And still, at least like in our practice, we haven't seen strong applications. And even though like the customers were trying to find a way to really kind of overcome those difficulties and challenges, but you still don't put I would say like generative AI in the driver's seat, right? This is where there are a lot of challenges. It's very aspirational to let generative AI, for example, to generate the information and images about the product data. Every retailer is currently dreaming of the experience of a virtual try-on. Then instead of seeing like the in e-commerce site, instead of seeing different models and a different apparel, you can see you in different pieces of apparel, right? And this is like what can be better for customer experience than selection. But in reality, we also see a lot of, and we implemented our fair share of a very interesting demos in this space, but still to create a very, very high fidelity results is still challenging. We are almost there. We're almost there. So like it's looking very plausible right now, but still there is a certain efforts needed in the overall kind of scientific and industry community to finally overcome this last mile of the plausibility to make it really shine. But I firmly believe that it will happen in the next few months. So to answer your question, where to start is, of course, if you want to invest into those very powerful, very aspirational use cases, you need to have a very good sense of selecting a right use case with right ROI. You need to start with something which is relatively low risk but high reward. And usually when you look at your enterprise, you can find a lot of such use cases, like things which really improve productivity, things which really deliver on a new customer experience. So those kind of things are very interesting. And you can build your confidence over a set of POCs or MVPs, put it in front of a customer, put it in front of internal customer first, then external customer, build confidence, and then go to production from there. So this is what we usually recommend to our customers. This is what we see, and this is the kind of a journey which we have with our customers.
That's great. Thank you, Eugene. And I don't know, Rowan, you look like you might want to comment on that. Am I no or yes? If you don't, that's
I'm trying to think if I have anything brilliant to add. I guess what I would add to that is, one thing that I encounter with tons of our clients and the broader market, and I'm sure some of you listening you probably have hundreds of use cases for generative AI, particularly if this is one of your big first forays into the AI space. And so to build off of Eugene's point, what we're seeing folks have success in is that they kind of take a two-prong approach. Like they focus on like the very like nitty-gritty on the ground, like use cases that have clear benefits. And I want to be specific about clear benefit because it's can be challenging today to calculate ROI on some of the generative AI applications just because we haven't had enough of them in the wild to do this in a broad-based way in some cases. But you can still measure impact in terms of productivity, employee experience, and things like that. But additionally, I think it is good to have a broader idea of like, okay, what types of use cases are going to take longer to build out, maybe even longer to ideate, but could be ultimately transformative to our business. And I think I'll just add a little bit of color here. Additionally, there's this as well, use cases that will be important for your business functionality and for you to remain, to basically to become like, or to operate with table stakes in the future. And these are going to be things like the productivity applications, the large language model supported writing applications that are available from various hyperscalers and other providers. Those types of things you're not going to like be building yourself most of the time or working with a provider to help you build as well. Those are going to be essentially provided as part of your core enterprise purchases. So a bunch of those use cases that people are battering your door down for today are probably going to be solved with just these productivity tool enhancements that we're going to see over the next year and a half or so.
Yeah. So Rowan, speaking of that, when I think about the challenges of starting to implement AI in an enterprise, I think, wow, one of the shortcuts to getting it done is going to be bringing the right firms in to help me. And I think there's a number of ways outside companies can help. I mean, they can help coming in and help show me how to write code, how to, manage large language models. They can also bring me some solutions that may be AI based and then integrate in with my own data. But I would like to know from you, I mean, how can you suggest to our audience that they might best evaluate outside vendors when making decisions about their AI priorities?
Yeah, so I think it's important to, when you're looking at vendor providers in this space, it's important to distinguish whether you're asking for more traditional or predictive AI capabilities, or whether you're also asking about generative AI capabilities, specifically ones supported by large language models. Now, we're talking about the former half of this. There's lots of questions around, what data sets did you use to train this? What types of explainability and transparency do you have on the models? How often do you update the models? What type of model of monitoring do you have in production, et cetera, et cetera? But when it comes to the generative AI side and large language models, there's new and slightly more nuanced spins on those questions. So when we're asking about, what is the training data involved in this model? Well, it's probably, a corpus that is so large that it's going to be very hard for you as a company to audit that data set yourself. So you're going to have to trust your vendor that they have done that auditing and that verification of the data. Now, I think it's also important to note on that count that a lot of the foundational platform providers, particularly when talking about the hyperscalers, they are now offering indemnities from any copyrighted content that is generated from these models. So that's one aspect on the data training side. There's also questions when you're interacting with the vendor, like what is the actual scalability of the model itself? So you may have, a very, very powerful model that can answer, very complex questions with great reasoning, but the actual, latency of that response might be like, 10 seconds for, 150 tokens or something like that. And that is not going to fly if what you're trying to do is build a real-time application that is interacting with employees or customers or whatever. And then, so that aspect of latency that, latency has always been an issue, but there's a new spin on it here. And then additionally, there's the question of what is called the context window. So how much data you can actually give to these models to do a task varies very widely. So if we look at Anthropic's Claude 2, that has, I believe, 80,000 tokens as the context window. It's, a couple hundred pages of text if we break it down. But if we look at, say, GPT-4, that has 32K context tokens that can be given to it. So it's a bit smaller. And what the context window is going to define for you is how much information you can give to that model to direct its behavior. So that is going to then influence what kind of application you're building. Because if you are trying to build an application where you give the model, say, a retrieved set of documents that amounts to 10 or 20 pages of documents to build a summary from, that's going to be a different size context window than if you're just trying to, pull back a single paragraph and maybe summarize it really quickly. So the context windows, the data, the latency, and then also the question around the actual running of the model itself. So does your provider either have the capacity themselves in terms of compute or through their partners to actually scale up to your production level when you're trying to run, 100,000 transactions in a minute, as opposed to, 5 an hour or something like that.
And don't forget about the cost, right?
Yes, well, yes. And the cost, and so that goes back to my other point about the ROI here. So when it comes to generative AI, like not all models are created equal. They have very different capabilities, but also they have very different price points. And so when you're looking at, especially as a developer, when you're looking at this stuff, you need to start to test and understand what the trade-offs are between various performance capabilities versus what is the latency of the model, and also sometimes what is the cost of the model, because it might not be actually worth it for your application to spend, 2 cents per token per API call, but it might be worth it to spend, 1/10 of a cent per token per API call, depending upon the value that you're getting out of that transaction.
So, for example, we often see that some of the customers are trying to use extremely large language model like GPT-4 for extremely simple problem like sentiment analysis, right? Like you're literally like taking the biggest hammer out there to hit on the smallest possible nail, and this is like it is fine for a POC and to impress your boss. But in reality, you really need to find the appropriate tool for your problem, and many of the real-life problems can be solved by so-called small large language models,
yeah.
which are which are actually can run on a very on a very small budget on small machines, but still are extremely powerful, like the next level of quality versus the previous generation of natural language processing tasks. So that's something which we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to the point that I think, so this, I guess, goes back to the misconceptions about the space. I think a big misconception about the space is that there are, maybe like 15 large language models out there. In reality, especially when we're talking about the open source and like some of the more tuned models, there are literally hundreds of thousands of models out there at this point in time. And in terms of practicality, there's probably like 1,000 or 2,000 that you would actually be looking at, but this is still a really large set of capabilities to be looking at. And so as developers, one thing to start thinking about is, what is this model actually going to be doing in the application? Is it going to be answering, questions? Is it going to be summarizing? Is it going to be creating embeddings for a vector database or something like that? So different large and small large language models have different types of specialized functionality. Like some of them, like XLM Boost or XLM Boost Roberta is very tuned for multilingual translations. And so it's probably not going to be very good at, analyzing your quarterly report for something that, may have been anomalous, but it can help you translate that from, Mandarin to French or something like that. So that's another aspect of this space, is it's actually much larger than many people think it is before they actually start to get into the technical aspects of it.
Okay, it makes me think that I need to hire both of you to help me know what to do next, because I'm starting to feel my head hurt. I think there's a lot of options and a lot of approaches, and it's pretty much new to a lot of us. And so I think stepping cautiously, maybe getting help or getting some outsiders to come in and help you analyze, number one, what are the right things to start with, and number two, how do you actually go about implementing them, could be wise for some companies out there. We are going to be starting to run short on time, but there's one topic I really would like to touch on just quickly, which is this idea, and I've seen a lot written about it, and probably a lot of you have, but how can enterprises manage data privacy concerns when working with public LLMs? I think this is a common question that's being asked now. And Eugene, maybe you can just, in the last few minutes, touch on that for us.
Yeah, indeed, like when OpenAI unrolled their kind of APIs, when Google unrolled their APIs, Anthropic unrolled their APIs, everybody started to develop different kind of applications. And of course, everybody started to work with the unsensitive data, like data which is already publicly available or data which doesn't carry any PII information. The first kind of generation of applications is hitting like production, hitting like the pilots, and everybody gets very excited and like wants to expand. And now the question is, okay, now we have PII data. What are we going to do? We cannot just send the information about our customers through the kind of public wires to third party, right? Sometimes it's possible because all these vendors are kind of providing all kind of guarantees that this data will not be used for training, or this data will not leak out, but security, and many customers are really concerned about that. So there are literally like a couple of options what to do. First of all, don't use private public LLM APIs. So there are open source models which can be deployed locally, and they are not as powerful usually, and not as versatile as the gigantic models from the public research organizations, but still for many tasks they are more than adequate. Second approach is to perform something along the lines what Ron already presented about the massage of the inputs to the large language models and massage of the outputs. So what you do is you can leverage a small large language models to identify and mask the PII data. So you can use locally deployed, like deployed on your cloud instance. You can deploy a smaller model with the simple task of identifying the data which has to be scraped or tokenized by tokenized, I mean like substitute with some token. For example, like it's not Eugene Steinberg, it's name, last name, right? And then you're sending it to the large language model. Large language model is processing and solving your task, and then you unscramble it. Basically, you all tokenize it on the way back. So these are the main approaches which we see right now, along with summarization and many other kind of different techniques which you are using to not let the sensitive data to leave your organization. But yeah, those are the main techniques which people are using.
Fantastic. That's great. That's very pragmatic, and I think very helpful to know that there are solutions. And I love that. Hey, you guys, I hate to say this, but we are just about out of time. And I have to say that time flew by for me. And I have so many more questions that I would love to talk to you about. But unfortunately, we don't have the time today. I'm hoping sometime in the near future, we can have a sequel to this tremendous session, where I hope our audience was able to learn a lot and get some great pragmatic tips about how to make AI work in their organizations. I want to thank you, Eugene and Rowan. You did a fantastic job. It was so interesting to listen to you. And I personally learned a lot. Really, really great information. And I want to thank Grid Dynamics as well for holding this webinar, because Grid always does such wonderful topics that I think are so engaging for our audience. So thank you, Grid, for holding this webinar. Hopefully we'll see you soon at another webinar that we'll be holding in the near future. We'll talk to you very soon. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.